All righty, everyone, why don't we begin? And all righty. N42. Oh, I thought you were bingo last week.
You went to the Minutemen? Was that-
Yeah, she
Yes,
did.
I went to the Minutemen.
Yeah, she did.
How was that?
It was excellent. You should have been there.
I know.
You were here.
Of course, at least some people made the right decision. At least some people made the right decision. Let us have a word of prayer. Good and gracious God, we give you thanks for bringing us together once again as we have continued to gather. We feel the sense of fellowship, and for that we are grateful. We take a moment now to center ourselves in your presence, knowing that you are here to lead us deeper into the mystery of your grace and your truth and your love. And for that, we are thankful. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, well, there's a seat over there, but David may come after all. All righty, so we are at the heart of the Christian story, the crucifixion, and you're going to learn, or shall I say, you're going to unlearn everything you thought you knew about the Christian story. There is so much cloak and dagger and behind the scenes stuff going on here that it absolutely fascinates me. And so without further ado, okay. So obviously this is the Holy Week through the crucifixion. And I want to call your attention to the bottom of 209. And it says that after the meal, Jesus and the disciples go to the Garden of Gethsemane. And then right after the Matthew 26:42 in parentheses, in this setting, referring to the Garden of Gethsemane, without the help of crowds or his disciples, Jesus is arrested. There's a reason why he was arrested there and at that time of night. And it wasn't a coincidence, and we'll get to that. I will just give you a preview of coming attractions. This is where the 30 pieces of silver come in that was paid to Judas. All right. Any questions on the words under preparing for the search? I learned something under Golgotha. In Greek, it's cranium. Yeah, this place of the skull, which makes sense. And when you take it into Latin, it's Calvaria, which is Calvary. That's where that word comes from. I learned that. That was good. I also learned this week that I always thought that Jesus was on the cross for 3 hours. And I'm reading one of the passages, and it says from the 3rd hour of the day was when he was crucified. And I said, wait a minute, that's 9 a.m. because they started the day at 6 a.m. And I know that he was on the cross till 3 p.m. I always thought he was on the cross from noon to 3, but he was actually on the cross from 9 to 3. And what I realized is part of my misunderstanding is because in the Episcopal Church, there is a Good Friday tradition where they have the 7 last word services that go from noon to 3 o'clock. So that's why I thought it was 3 hours. But then I realized one of the readings, it said that the first time Jesus spoke, Father, forgive them, it was at the 6th hour of the day. And so that's why they have the 7 last words from noon to 3, because Jesus is on the cross from 9 to noon. He speaks for the first time at 3, and then speaks 6 more times, and then dies at 3. Okay. Say again, please.
We used to do the 12 to 3 at church.
Did you really? Yeah. Yep.
We had it open.
Yeah, it would be open for 12 to 3. Yeah, a lot of churches will do that. Do you know what the cause of death is for someone who is crucified?
Suffocation.
Suffocation. Yeah, it's not loss of blood, it's suffocation. Because what happens is the nails interrupt with the flow of blood. And so you slowly get less and less oxygen into your bloodstream. And if you've ever seen a crucifix, which obviously is the cross with Jesus on it, there's what's called the stirrup. Okay, it's a block of wood where the feet are nailed in. All right, and what people would do on the cross is they would push up on that, because raising themselves allowed them to get more oxygen into their lungs. The other reason why that block of wood was there wasn't to allow them to rest. It was if they didn't have it there to support some of the weight, basically the nails would rip through the hands and you fall off the cross. And it wasn't unusual for people to be on the cross for 2-3 days because Jesus was severely, basically tortured. He was weakened to begin with. And Gold Star, if anybody can tell me, if they wanted to hasten death, what would they do?
They break the legs.
They'd break their legs. Yep, because that would further impede the flow of oxygen and hasten the asphyxiation. And when they got to Jesus, because the Sabbath was coming on and the religious leaders did not want the bodies on the cross over the Sabbath, they they broke the legs of the two thieves, but they didn't break Jesus's legs because he was already dead. And there's one of the Psalms that says, but his bones they did not break. And it's like many passages, it can have a interpretation for the Jewish faith and also for Christian faith. All righty, so so let's. By the way, they made it very easy for you. They had all the passion narratives in Mark's gospel, so you wouldn't have to jump around. But let's just go through Mark 11. Any questions in this reading? I think we'll do this and then I'll just throw out some observations. I want to make sure that I answer any questions you have.
It's only John's gospel that talks about breaking legs.
I think so, yes, yep. So Jesus rides into Jerusalem on Palm Sunday, and you can see how things are developing right off the bat. The people start shouting, Hosanna. I'm surprised that wasn't in one of the words. Hosanna is literally translated as an Arabic word that means save us now. Okay, what did they want to be saved from? It comes in the rest of the things they say. Blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Lord. Blessed is the Son of David. Okay, and this one, I think it actually says the coming kingdom of our father David. So that tells you right off the bat, they're looking for a political Messiah who's going to save them from the Romans. I also will point out in verse 8, it says some people waved palms, some people threw down their coats. And I gave a sermon many years ago, and the title of the sermon was, Are you a coat person or a palm person? And if you think about it, okay, one of the Gospels says that people ran into the fields and cut palm branches. So it wasn't even their palm branches that they were using. But the people who laid down their coats, they were really making a sacrifice because, you've got the donkey walking over the coats and then the people following and everything. And so, you go to pick up your coat and you might find some rips and tears in it, and you might find a few donkey droppings on it. And so I said in the sermon, when it comes to your faith, are you a coat person or a palm person? It's easy to be a palm person. It's a lot harder to be a coat person. And by the way, we won't have to switch over to this, but in Matthew's gospel, the description of Jesus riding into Jerusalem, he quotes from Zechariah, the prophet Zechariah. This was to fulfill, remember we said that Matthew was writing to a Jewish audience, and he says, Lo, behold, your king comes to you, humble and lowly, riding on a colt on the foal of a donkey. Okay. And so in Matthew's gospel, you have the disciples getting 2 animals a colt and a donkey. And Matthew basically says, and spreading their coats on it, Jesus got on and rode in. And it's always, I mean, has he got one leg on each side? It's clearly two animals. And you know why? Because Matthew did not understand Jewish poetry. Okay, and a lot of the prophets was poetry. When we think of poetry, it's rhymes like should, could, would. Jewish poetry, ancient Jewish poetry had thought rhymes. Okay, so they would say something one way and then say it slightly different. And that's what's going on with the quote that Matthew includes. It's a thought rhyme. Matthew doesn't understand that, so he thinks that the prophet's talking about two different animals when it's really a thought. I'll give you an example of Jewish poetry. And like I say, it says one thing and then it says the same thing a different way. Okay, this is Psalm 27, and you can see the thought rhyme here. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the stronghold of my life, basically saying the same thing. Of whom shall I be afraid? Same thing, just said slightly different. That's why Matthew didn't understand that it was ancient Jewish poetry and he has Jesus riding in on two animals. All righty, so from there, oh yes, this is Jesus and the money changers. This is the straw that broke the camel's back. All right. And in fact, I think it says in this reading that this is after Jesus threw the money changers out. That's when they said, they plotted to get rid of him. Why? Because he was hitting them in the pocketbook.
Yeah.
The money changers were cheating poor people in two ways. Okay. One was you couldn't use Roman coins in the temple. Why? Because they had the image of Caesar on it. Okay. And so what you had to do is, you had to go to Ahmed, the money changer, and you'd give him, just to make it simple, you'd give him a $10 coin, and he'd give you a $5 temple coin. And he split the money with the high priest and his followers. Okay, cheating poor people out of what little they had. The other way in which they were cheating poor people is you would go to the temple, animal sacrifices. Now you could bring an animal from your flock, but it had to be inspected before it could be offered in the temple because it could not be it had to be without blemish. Okay, you couldn't give God the runt of the litter or anything like that. So if you brought your own lamb, they'd say, go down there and have Shlomo or whatever, inspect the lamb. And of course they would reject it. And then they would have to go and buy a lamb from the authorized dealer, and they would charge them an arm and a leg. So that's, Jesus was angry because they were desecrating his father's house, but he was also very angry because they were cheating poor people, and that he did not like. So this was a straw that broke the camel's back. They say, we got to get rid of this guy. Okay, we have the 14, the Passover meal. Any questions there? I'm going to throw out a. Yep.
What do you make of the person's victory?
The what?
What do you make of the person's victory? It wasn't one of our readings, but where Jesus curses the fig tree.
Oh, yeah, they kind of skirted that one. So there's a story. Do you remember which gospel it was?
It's in Matthew, or it's in Mark.
Oh, but they had to skip over that? Oh, how convenient, how convenient. Yeah. Yep. So after Jesus, is this right after the cleansing of the temple? Right before. So Jesus goes by this fig tree. He's hungry, and the fig tree, it isn't the season for figs, so he curses it. Next day they go by and they look at it, and the fig tree's dead to the roots. And
Well, and he also says, may no one ever eat fruit from you again.
yeah.
It's like really.
Yeah, exactly. It's one of these passages that, so this is the way I've always looked at that and say, well, come on, Jesus, if you wanted if you were hungry and you wanted to show your power and everything, why don't you bless the fig tree and then the next day you get a fig? But I suppose he was hungry right then and there and he didn't want to wait till the next day. So he curses it. And, you know, it shows the human side of Jesus. It shows us that he could have a short fuse at times. And let's also remember how much incredible stress he was under, you know? So,
It was in a bad mood because it said it wasn't the right season. Okay.
yeah, it wasn't the right season. No, nope, nope. So, yes, it's interesting that they skipped over that. But again, I see it as you know, Jesus under tremendous amount of stress. And, you know, at least it was a plant and not a person.
Yeah.
There's a deeper meaning to that.
Say again, please.
There's a deeper meaning to that.
Like what? When?
No, I mean, I
Oh,
don't know. It's like it was during the fig season. You know, you think, oh, yeah, and then the Lord would be like, oh, you don't bear your fruit.
Yeah. yeah, yeah,
But I just can't figure out, like,
yeah.
do you know of any, like, metaphors that can be associated with it?
It may be, I'm not familiar. I'd have to. Pardon me?
And like the next
Well,
page
it's-
says the lesson with the fig tree, is that?
Oh.
connected at all?
Which one is that?
I don't
Where-
know.
Well, yeah.
Chapter
11,
Chapter 13, 20,
we're at 13, you said?
13 verse 28.
Oh, from the drink, it was pleasant. Yeah.
I don't know if that's connected to.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's interesting, you know, he's talking about learn the lesson from the fig tree when it puts forth. It's when its branch becomes tender, puts out leaves, you know, summer is near.
So also, you know,
But in a sense, it almost works against what happens. You know, Jesus, are there any leaves on the tree? Is
I
the
feel
branch
I
tender?
feel like this is like a lesson for Jesus.
Yeah, maybe.
It's not the
Yeah,
right.
well,
season.
but you know, I liken this and so another passage that gives people a lot of pause when it comes to Jesus is the woman who comes to him, and actually she keeps going to his disciples saying, heal my daughter, and the disciples get frustrated, they send her to Jesus, and Jesus says, well, and oh, she wasn't a Jew. She was, well, one gospel has her as a Canaanite woman, one who has Syro-Phoenician, which would be up around the coast of Lebanon, as we know it today. And Jesus basically says, you know, I'd like to help you, but I was sent only to the lost sheep of Israel. Okay. In other words, you're not a Jew. I can't help you. And oh, and then he says, you know, it's not right to take the children's bread and throw it to the dogs. You know, I mean, it's pretty, what's it, harsh. But then she says, yes, but even the dogs get the crumbs that fall from the master's table. And she's basically saying, you know, I believe in you. I'll take whatever little grace you can spare. And Jesus is great as this woman's faith. And I've always seen that as you know, kind of Jesus growing a little bit too, and opening his eyes a little wider. You know, we see Jesus as divine, but we also have to see him as fully human. And you know, if he has a bad day, I'm not gonna criticize him for that, because like I say, he was under tremendous pressure. There might be a deeper meaning. I'll have to go back and look and see if I can find something, but but in Mark 14, the Last Supper, and of course, Catholics take verse 22 literally. Take, this is my body, okay? And in the Catholic Church, they believe in transubstantiation. Big word, simple meaning. Trans means to change. Substantiation, substance, change substance. The Catholic Church teaches that when the priest elevates the host and says the prayer of consecration, that host, that wafer, literally, and I can't stress it enough, literally becomes the body and blood of Christ. So if Jesus says, this is my body broken for you, should we take it literally? Is transubstantiation where it's really at?
On our faith,
What's that?
not in our faith.
No, I know, but my point is, how can we know that that's to be taken symbolically and not literally? How do we know that the Catholics aren't right?
There is something,
What's that?
there is something moving about it,
Oh, yeah,
you know.
yeah, I don't believe in transubstantiation, but there are parts of the mass that are very moving, yeah.
Even the idea that it's like the phrase that you sometimes hear more in the Episcopal
Mhm.
tradition, where they believe the same thing.
Yeah,
You know, there's a phrase that kind of the evangelical
yeah,
Episcopals use, it's like, Lord, break my heart,
yeah,
because they really are trying to say, make me aware.
Yeah.
Make me aware of
mhm,
injustice, poverty, and so on. So,
yeah, yeah,
you know, the handful of people I know who sort of sit in that faith tradition, when I hear them talk about how they have to reflect on that and what it means, that in ingesting it,
mhm,
it's kind of a manifestation of saying, Lord, break my heart,
Yeah.
change me.
Yeah.
Because you are now in my heart.
Yeah.
You're part of who I am.
Yep.
And.
Yep.
You know, I mean, do I think that literally happens? No.
no,
But I kind of like the notion
yeah,
that when we do partake of the Lord's Supper.
Yeah.
We are saying, change me.
yep. And, one thing I will say I admire about the Catholic Church is that they have a much more genuine sense of the sacred than we do at times, and that host is so sacred. And, I envy that. I wish we had a more robust sense of the sacred. And we do to a certain extent. Some of you will remember Betty Rideout. And I'll never forget, Betty Rideout was a deacon and served communion one Sunday. And when communion was over, one of the deacons who had served communion got up to go to the back of the sanctuary, and he took his empty communion cup and put it on the table. And Betty had a fit. A layperson shouldn't be, leaving their empty dishes on the communion. The sort of way she looked. Yes, Max.
I'm also curious, like what, I don't know, it's all Catholics or some, are they Orthodox Catholics, but I've seen like, they have this like statue-ish thing, that's like literally the Holy Spirit. You know what I'm talking about?
No.
Sometimes I'll put that over the altar, but that's just
No,
decoration.
I've seen, oh man, I gotta figure out what it's called. I don't know what sect of Catholicism it is, but it's like, this is literally the Holy Spirit.
Does it have?
Yeah, it's the star.
That's called the monstrance.
Okay.
It's the monstrance, and basically what it is it has a relic in it that's tied to Jesus.
Yeah.
Okay, and it represents the body and the blood of Christ. If you
Okay.
want to see a great movie where that plays in the end of the movie, watch The Mission. Won the best picture in 1983. When it comes to transubstantiation, Jesus, this is my body broken for you. Okay. The way I look at it, Jesus also said, I am the door, but I never saw any hinges on him. Okay. The other thing that I'll say is, when Jesus was celebrating the Last Supper, what Jewish feast was he celebrating? Passover, okay? And what did you do to celebrate the Passover? Well, I mean, what Jews did. You basically kill a lamb, and back in Egypt, you put it on the doorpost and the angel of death passed over you. But, even to this day, the Passover meal consists of a lamb. And Jesus is literally playing these parallels, okay? So just as the lamb saved the Jewish people from slavery in Egypt. Jesus is, what did John the Baptist call him? Yep, Jesus, John the Baptist, when he sees Jesus first time, he says, behold the Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the world. So Jesus is symbolically saying, you know, I am the lamb that is going to be sacrificed, that is going to deliver all of you from the bondage of sin, okay? Lamb of God, okay? But I never saw, you know, Jesus with a tail jumping around, you know? So my point is that you can take it literally, but you can also take it symbolically. You know, like you, Stephanie, I see some grace in, you know, it for the Catholic Church, and it touches my heart. But, you know, I believe in the real presence.
But he is presenting it. Isn't Jesus presenting it at the Last Supper symbol?
Yeah, in a sense he is, yes. Yeah, I guess that you said it much better than I did. Yep. So, all right, so then he goes to Gethsemane, and he prays in the Garden of Gethsemane. And why the Garden of Gethsemane? I mean, didn't Caiaphas and the high priest Caiaphas and the other Pharisees know who Jesus was? So they could have arrested him anytime they wanted.
But that's what he used to put a praying.
Well, so here's where it starts to get cloak and dagger. Caiaphas and the Pharisees want to get rid of Jesus, okay? But they know he's popular with the people. So they've got to do it in a sneaky way. They need information. They need to know where they can find Jesus at a time when no one's going to be around. And so they bribe Judas with 30 pieces of silver for information. So Judas goes to them and he says, look, you know, I know that after we celebrate the Passover, we're going to go out to the Garden of Gethsemane. It's outside the city walls. It's off a ways. It's going to be late at night because the Passover doesn't start till sundown. You'll be able to arrest him there very quietly and nobody will know. Okay. So again, cloak and dagger, and it's going to get even better than this. So, excuse me. By the way, Judas gets blamed for being the disciple who betrayed Jesus. But you could also make the argument that Judas thought he was doing what Jesus wanted him to do, okay? Judas, it's highly likely, was a zealot. He was one of the Jews that wanted a revolution and thought Jesus was going to lead them in it, okay? At the Last Supper, when Jesus says, one of you will betray me, they say, you know, not I, Rabbi. And he says, it's the one who dips the bread in the dish with me. And at that moment, it's Judas. And Jesus then says to Judas, what you are about to do quickly. Now, if you're Judas and you think that Jesus is this political Messiah who's going to lead you all in rebellion against Rome, and he says to you, what you are about to do quickly, wouldn't you think that Judas is thinking, oh, he's giving me the green light to go ahead with this. This is going to jumpstart, because when he gets arrested, all of his followers are going to be up in arms and everything. So you could make the argument that Judas thought that he was doing what Jesus wanted him to do. And, you know, the other way I put it is, at least when things didn't happen the way Judas thought they were going to happen, he killed himself. He felt remorse. Peter tried to pretend like nothing had ever happened. Oh, Lord, you know, even if all these would betray you, I will never betray you. Truly, Peter, I tell you, before the rooster crows this night, you will deny me 3 times. And then when Jesus appears to them beside the Sea of Galilee, he asks them 3 times. And the first time he says, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? All these other disciples. And he's forcing Peter to remember that, you know, he boasted that he would never. But Peter wants to pretend like everything was just fine, nothing happened. So at least Judas felt some remorse. Peter was kind of forced to feel his remorse.
That's the kind of hard to believe, since he sent them to the Sanhedrin and not.
Say again, please.
Like, I find that, I guess, alternate or whatever thought of Judas unlikely, given he handed him over to the Sanhedrin, not to the Roman authorities. he sent him to the Jewish authorities, who then sent him to Rome to be punished.
Yep, stay
So if you
tuned.
guys were gonna lead the revolution, you would have sent them to the Roman authorities, you know what I mean?
Well, hold on to that thought. I see where you're going and I agree.
Only the Romans could.
Right, and that's-
Right, but It was on recommendation from the Sanhedrin,
Right,
the Romans could have just killed him, I mean, they were the governing body.
But by
Right.
keeping him within the Jewish system,
right.
it was, I see where you're going.
Yep.
because if you're supposed to be leading a revolution,
So,
having to deal with.
It was against the Rome, it wasn't against the.
no, but there was a process they had to follow through. And hopefully as I kind of continue to connect the dots, it'll answer your question. If it doesn't,
Every single prison, like every single thing didn't have to go through the Sanhedrin, it could just go directly to the governor.
right, yep. Yeah, it had to follow a certain pattern. I suppose, you're right, he could have taken them directly to
Like
the Romans.
Romans didn't arrest him.
No, Romans didn't, it was the Jews that arrested him. Yep, yep. So, so Jesus is arrested and, let me see. Oh, the young man who runs away naked.
What was that? What was that?
Yeah.
That scripture before, it's like.
Oh, yeah, yeah, it's there. And I did some checking up on this because, I was kind of thinking, I've read this 100 times, but, I never really kind of delved into it. I always was told that it was actually, Mark himself, the writer of the gospel. Another interpretation I read said that, those who read Mark's gospel would have known who it was, but he wasn't mentioned by name to protect him from the Romans. So one of those interesting little things there, and I was thinking, how could I make a sermon out of that? And I thought, when was the last time you stood fully naked in front of God? I'm speaking in a metaphorical sense, that I'd have to work on that sermon though. Okay, so Jesus is taken before the Sanhedrin. Now remember, this is still the middle of the night. They try him, and what is the moment at which they just go bonkers and they convict him and say he's worthy of death?
You say he's Christ?
Yeah. He says that he's Christ, the Son of God. And that was blasphemy to the Jews, because for any human being to say that they were literally the Son of God was an insult to God as far as they were concerned. So he was guilty of blasphemy. Okay, but they had a problem, and some of you have already touched upon it. They didn't have the ability or the authority to put him to death, and they wanted him dead and gone for good. So they have to bring him to the Romans. Now, whether Judas thought all this out, I don't know. It's possible he knew that this was a sequence of events. So they bring him to Pilate, and again, still middle of the night, okay? But they have problem now. Do you think that Pilate gives two hoots about Jewish faith and traditions? He's not a Jew. He could care less if Jesus is guilty of blasphemy. So they need a charge that's going to get Pilate's attention. And do you notice that while Jesus is condemned by the Sanhedrin for blasphemy, by the time they get to Pilate, the charges change to King of the Jews. That's going to get Pilate's attention, because that's a challenge to Rome. But even Pilate sees through it and says, this is a lot of inter-party squabbling and shenanigans going on here, but King of the Jews. And if you've ever seen a crucifix that has Jesus on the cross, some of them on the top will have a little plaque with the letters I-N-R-I. What does that stand for?
I don't know what it actually, I don't want to know what it says, but it says King of the Jews.
Yes, yes. So in Latin, There is no letter J. The letter J is written with an I. In fact, you ever saw the last Indiana Jones where he's going in there and he steps on the wrong phone? He says, oh, this J, yeah, so, okay, anyways. So no letter J, it's written with the I. So the first J is Jesus. The N, go ahead. Nazareth, very good. Very good confirmation student, paid attention in class. The other one's sleeping, but we won't wake him. So Jesus of Nazareth, what does the R stand for? Rex. So what dinosaur is known as the king of the dinosaurs? Tyrannosaurus Rex. Rex is Latin for king. So I-N-R, and then the I, Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews. So that's what it stands for. Yep. And then they say, oh, well, don't say that he's King of the Jews. Say that he said he was the King of the Jews. And Pilate says, what I have written, I have written. And that's the end of that. All righty. Oh, and verse 11, this is Mark 15. Mark 11, where is it here? Yep. But the chief priests stirred up the crowds to have him release for them Barabbas. All right. Now, one of the questions that often will get asked is, how did these people who shouted Hosanna on Palm Sunday, 4 days later, start shouting, crucify him? You know, and by the way, this is why, bit of liturgical trivia. Churches that celebrate Ash Wednesday with the imposition of ashes, do you know where those ashes come from? The palms from the previous year. Okay, because it's to symbolize how they betrayed Jesus. They went from praising him, welcoming him, to saying crucify him. So the palms are burned and then saved for Ash Wednesday the following year. But here's the thing. I don't think that the people actually flipped on Jesus like that. Think about it. All of this is happening in the middle of the night. We know that Jesus is condemned to be crucified at 6 a.m. in the morning. The people welcomed into Jerusalem weren't even awake yet. They had no idea what was going on. If they did, then why were people along the route crying and everything?
Do you think that they were Roman people that were saying crucify?
Second, these were the Pharisees and all of their henchmen. That's the way I look at it, you know. So I think that the people who welcomed him on Palm Sunday, even if he wasn't that political Messiah. Oh, it gave me a thumb up again. I kept thinking, oh, and a couple of weeks ago I got a down one. I don't know, it didn't happen that time, but anyways, so I lost my train of thought.
Yeah.
The people, you know, oh, even if, you know, they were upset that he wasn't the political Messiah, he was certainly someone who reached out to the poor and the oppressed and those who were different and unaccepted. You know, lepers, he would touch lepers, he sat beside the well with the Samaritan woman, a foreigner and a woman to boot. You know, so I don't believe that the people who were saying crucify him were the same people. They weren't even up yet, or they were just waking up. And as they're waking up, Jesus is already on his way to the cross. See, I told you, you would see the crucifixion in a whole different way. Okay, and this is where Mark 15, this is where things where I learned, because Mark 15:25. Yeah, and it was the third hour when they crucified him, and that would be 9 o'clock. And I said, wait a minute, that's not right. Okay. Oh, in verse 35. Okay, and this is where, and at the 9th hour, Jesus cried with a loud voice, Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani, which means, my God, why have you forsaken me? He's quoting right there, 22nd Psalm. Okay, and somebody want to read verse 35? Anybody? I'm just curious what's other translations. Go ahead. Yep.
And some bystanders heard him and said, behold, he is calling Elijah.
Okay. So why would they get excited or pay attention if they thought that he was calling Elijah? And you can see, by the way, this is one of the few verses in the Gospels where the original Aramaic is left in there. Okay. I mean, they could have just said, Jesus with a loud voice cried, my God, why why hast thou forsaken me? But they leave the original Aramaic in there. And they do that so that you can see how the people in the crowd could have thought he was saying Elijah, Eloi, Eloi. You know, he's weak, he's tired, he's probably, voice is not really loud. And so that's why they say he's calling Elijah. Now, why would that be of importance or get their attention?
Elijah didn't die.
Well, Elijah didn't die. He's one of two people in the Hebrew scriptures who goes directly to heaven. And because of that, the other one, by the way, was someone by the name of Enoch. So because Elijah didn't die, he was taken directly to heaven. He became a very important person in terms of Jewish expectations with the Messiah. And you won't have to do this, I'll do it really quickly. But if I go back to the book of Malachi, which is the very ending of the Hebrew scriptures, it's the last book in the Hebrew scriptures, okay? And we read these words, behold, I will send you Elijah the prophet before the great and awesome day of the Lord comes. Okay. Great and awesome day of the Lord is sort of code for the coming of the Messiah. So in Judaism, the belief is that Elijah has to come before the Messiah comes. So you can imagine these people that are sitting at a cross and they think they hear Jesus saying Elijah. And so that's why they said, look, he is calling Elijah. They think that Elijah might suddenly appear and whoa, all bets would be off at that point, because then he really would have been the Messiah. So, it's sort of like, is it really going to be the way we, yep.
They thought Elijah was gonna come and take him down.
Yes, they thought that Elijah was going to come and something miraculous was going to come, and maybe he would lead them in the rebellion against the Romans. It was sort of like he's at the point of total defeat, and then it turns around. But of course, Christians believe that turnaround came on Easter morning when he was, when he rose from the dead. And in fact, there's a story in one of the Gospels where I think it's some of the Pharisees go to Jesus and they say to him, don't the scriptures say that Elijah must come first before the Messiah appears? And Jesus says, truly, I tell you, Elijah has come and you did to him as you please. There's lots of interpretations. New Age spiritualists, I remember seeing this once, would say that Jesus was basically saying that John the Baptist was the reincarnation of Elijah. And by the way, there's a basic reason why reincarnation conflicts with the essence of the Christian faith. For this reason, at the heart of the Christian faith is the belief that we cannot save ourselves, okay? That our salvation comes through the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. You can't do it yourself. It's impossible to do it yourself. And essentially what reincarnation says is you keep coming back until you get it right. So they're at odds with each other. But others say that Jesus was saying that John the Baptist embodied the spirit of Elijah. I actually had an aha moment a number of years ago when I suddenly realized that we don't have that problem about Elijah coming back as Christians. we can say that Jesus is the Messiah and that Elijah did come back. Because when Jesus went up onto the Mount of Transfiguration and he began to glow and he was transfigured, okay, then suddenly appeared two people talking with him. And who were those two people? Moses and Elijah. So Elijah did come back. So anyways, that's why the Eloi Eloi is kept in the original Aramaic.
What do you make of the different last words of Jesus between the gospels?
Say again, please.
Like, what do you make of the, like, so Mark has, why have you forsaken me, when John has, menace, like.
Yeah,
menace.
so-
Here at Matthew, I guess something even different.
Yep. So if you will skip over to page 216. Remember I said that in the Episcopal tradition, there's a service every Good Friday from 12 to 3 p.m. It's called the Seven Last Words. And if you look at all of the Gospels, okay, we see that Jesus spoke 7 times while he was on the cross. You know, it wasn't literally 7 last words. So for example, if I were to say to someone, I'd like to have a word with you, okay? Does that mean I'm just going to say 1 syllable? No. So the 7 last words means Jesus spoke 7 times, you know, and by the way, do you know what the 7 last words are in most churches? We never did it that way before.
Yeah.
Yeah, change. You know, how many congregationals does it take to change a light bulb?
Man.
Change, what do you mean change? My grandmother gave that light bulb to the church. It's why when we did the sanctuary over, some of you will remember, we were very adamant that we were not going to put plaques on anything. Because once you put a plaque on something, it becomes sacred and you can't change it or get rid of it. Yep. So on 216, we have the 7 last words that Jesus spoke. And I was a little surprised, well, not really. They did it in order of the Gospels as they appear in the New Testament, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Okay, so the Matthew 27:46, that's the my God, why have you forsaken me? It's the same thing that we see in Mark 15:34. The Luke 23, what's that one? Father, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. The Luke 23:43 is the 2 prisoners on the other side. One of them, you know, rails against Jesus. You know, if you're the Messiah, then save yourself and save us while you're at it. And then the second one is known as the penitent thief, says, basically, leave him alone. This man has done nothing wrong. We are being justly punished for our sins. And then he turns to Jesus and says, Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. And Jesus says, truly, I tell you today, you will be you will be with me in paradise. In fact, I want to look at that for just a second. Luke 23, because there's a conundrum in there. There is a conundrum. Luke 23, verse 43. Yep, 23:43. A real conundrum. 23:43. Yeah. And verse 43, and he said to him, truly I tell you, today you will be with me in paradise. See the conundrum there?
Oh, we talked about this.
Oh, we did. Yes, yeah. So Jesus was in the tomb 3 days, well, parts of 3 days anyways. So if Jesus is in the tomb 3 days, how can he say to the penitent thief, today you'll be with me in paradise?
I think we decided that the comma was.
This is very good. It's a
a
punctuation. So if you look at it, the way it's written, today, truly I tell you, today you will be with me in paradise means one thing, but move the comma to after today. Truly I tell you today, comma, you will be with me in paradise. See the big difference? It has to be the second way. It's the only way it makes sense.
I don't necessarily take the today literally. I mean, when we die,
Yeah,
we're asleep
yep,
till Jesus comes again.
correct.
So maybe, the person that's gonna die, his today is gonna be.
Yeah, yeah, you didn't want to take the total wind out of your sails. You're gonna be in the
That's a
ground
long
for a
day.
couple thousand
Yeah.
years. A long day. Okay, so that's today will be Luke 23:46. Well, we're right there, so we might as well continue. Where does it say? Then Jesus, calling out with a loud voice, says, Father, into your hands I commend, oh, well, I always knew commend, but commit my spirit. And now, oh, the last three are in John 19. John 19, John 19. First one is 26 and 27. Oh, yes. Yep. Yep. This is, he says to Mary, behold your son, and then he turns to the beloved disciple John and says, behold your mother. And he's entrusting the care of Mary into the care of John. And when I went on my cruise that went through Turkey, we saw the House of Mary in Ephesus. And it was fascinating. So there was this nun in the Middle Ages who had these visions of the last days of Mary. Now the Catholic Church says they have what's called the Day of the Assumption. Mary is assumed up into heaven. She also doesn't die. And anyways, this nun had a vision of the last house that Mary was in, and she described it in detail. And they were doing an excavation on a hilltop outside of Ephesus, and they found this house that matched kind of almost exactly the description of it. And yeah, it was the House of Mary. It was kind of fascinating. Now, yes, sir.
Well, sort of question about Mary.
Okay.
Take this here. So just a few chapters back here, I came across this in my reading the other day,
All right,
and it's Luke chapter 11, verse 27.
Luke.
It said these things, the woman in the crowd raised her voice and said to him, blessed is the womb that bore you, and the breast of which you nourished.
Yep.
But he said, blessed rather are those who hear the word of God and keep it. So then what I think of is a Catholic thing. It's like, blessed is the fruit of the womb.
The Hail Mary.
Yeah, the Hail, that, then the Hail Mary, I'm like, wait, that doesn't line up with that.
That what?
This verse doesn't line up with the Hail Mary. When
Oh.
someone says, oh, blessed is the woman who, it says, no, rather bless those who hear the word of God, keep it.
Yeah, yeah, I hadn't looked at it that way. What you're referring to is what Elizabeth says when Mary comes to visit her. Blessed is the fruit of your womb, and why is it that the mother of my Lord should come and visit me? For as soon as the babe in my womb heard the sound of your voice, it leapt for joy. I'll have to do some more thinking about the two of those, but I see what you're.
Like, I read that just because we were talking about Mary, I'm like, totally good.
But it could be both. It could be both and rather than either or. In this sense, okay. At that time, when Mary goes to see Elizabeth, Elizabeth saying, you are blessed. You've been chosen. And in this situation later on, Jesus is saying, well, let's not talk about my mother being blessed. Let's talk about those who are blessed when they follow, So I think that's one of the things you have to put it in context. And again, I'm a firm believer in both and often, and not just either or. We get ourselves into so much trouble these days because of that. But here's another thing that I find fascinating. For the longest time, when I read this passage and when Jesus said, woman, behold your son, I thought he was referring to himself and not John. It's almost as Jesus on the cross saying, woman, behold your son. In other words, I'm sorry it had to come to this, and I'm sorry that this is so painful for you. I did what I had to do. And then all of a sudden I'm reading some commentary and this is, oh no, this is referring to John. I like it referring to Jesus himself better. I think it makes it much more poignant.
That was Jesus.
Did you really? Oh, good. I'm not the only one. Yeah, but clearly he's entrusting the care of Mary to John the disciple. But, you know, and this raises an interesting question in this sense, okay? If Jesus had brothers, which we're told, wouldn't it have been the responsibility of one of the brothers to take care of her? Why is Jesus entrusting Mary to someone outside the family, so to speak?
It doesn't talk about his brothers that much.
No, but they do. Now, the Catholic Church says that when it says brothers, it either means generically, like we say, you know, brothers and sisters in Christ and things like that. But the Catholic Church also says that when it refers to brothers, these were half siblings, that Joseph was previously married, and these were children from a previous marriage. However, as Protestants, we say, where does it say that in here? I missed that. Okay.
Reflect on my little family dynamics. I mean, Mary had followed him through his ministry.
Mm-hmm.
She may have been estranged from her other children.
Yeah, it's possible.
And, you know, he loved John
Mm-hmm.
and, you know, was, I think, assuring his mother
Mm-hmm.
that her physical needs would be taken care of.
Yep.
Since
He's
she had
concerned about her.
So, you
Yeah.
know, I think that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's how I,
The caretaking there is. so-
Oh, okay. That's how you,
that she would be, yeah, she would be traveling all around, so her kids wouldn't be, like, she would kind of not be.
oh, interesting.
Right, but
Okay.
it's like food.
And we know that at least a couple of his brothers were very involved in the early church. So maybe Jesus is also thinking, you know, but John was also very involved in the early church. So it just, you know, it's, you know, years ago, we did a Ask the Pastor children's version, and somebody's asked the question, what happened to Joseph? You know, we see Joseph when Jesus was 12 and then never again. And so the question, what happened to Joseph? And I remember saying, beats the heck out of me. But you know what? I kind of like that because I don't want faith where I know it all and I already have all the answers. I want a faith that has some mystery to it. And you know, that's one of the things, going back to what we was talking about the Catholic Church, is that sense of mystery and sacredness. And you know, I kind of like that. You were gonna say something, Max? No?
Oh, no, I just found it.
Okay.
About to read the day, it was, Luke chapter 8.
Oh, about, yep, yep. That's in Luke 11.
Yes, it was, Luke chapter 8, verse, 16. And his mother and his brothers came to him, but they could not reach him. because-
Oh, yeah, this is where he said, who are my mother and my brothers? And he says,
But
here are my
those
mother.
all of you are
Yeah.
true.
Yep. John 19:28. This is the, where is it here? Yeah, this is where he says, I thirst. And then 19:30 is where he says, it is finished, and he bowed his head and gave up his spirit. So to answer your question, Dave, different gospels have different words, and there is an order, though, when you celebrate seven last word service. So I'm going to tell you the order. Anyone want to guess what the first one is? What the first thing Jesus said from the cross? It makes sense.
My sake.
Nope.
Forgive them.
Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Cross is all about forgiveness and reconciliation. Second one is the penitent thief. Today, I tell you, you will be with me in paradise, which is Luke 23:43. The third word is John 19:28. I thirst. The fourth word is John 19:26-27. This is, woman, behold your son. Behold your woman, behold your son, behold your mother. The fifth verse is my God, why have you forsaken me, which is the first two at the top. The sixth one is the last one, John 19:30. It is finished. And the seventh word is, makes sense, law, Luke 23:46. Father, into your hands I commend my spirit. And it says, and with that, he breathed his last. By the way, what did John mean, or what did Jesus mean in the sixth word? It is finished. That's, you could take it one way, it is finished, but I think there's another way to take it. So it is finished kind of is a kind of defeat, but I think there's a way of reading it. It's is more of a way of looking at it as a sign of victory. So did you say something, Stephanie, or?
Stephanie said it's his ministry,
Ministry.
right?
Yeah, basically it is finished. I take that as Jesus saying, you know what? I fulfilled my destiny. I've completed my mission. I did what I was called to do. It is finished. And with that, he,
What about the one before that? This is like,
yep. So,
and thirsty or like thirsty?
yeah, basically, take it literally. Hot part of the world. He's been on this cross for 3 hours. He's literally thirsting. And, you know, they go and they dip the sponge there and they offer it up to him.
That's something that I always wondered about
What's that?
vinegar. I'm thirsty.
Yep.
And they give him vinegar, from the vinegar on hyssop.
Yep.
Is that like,
So I've heard that it's almost like a mocking kind of thing. You know? Now, if you remember, they, when he is first going to the cross, they offer him something to drink, and I wish I could remember, it was wine with something. And what that is all about is, it was actually a narcotic and a sedative, and he refuses it. So that was an act of mercy. But this I've always heard is sort of a mocking kind of thing. Yep.
You know, where it's a metaphor and where. If you can't figure out what the metaphor is, you want to say, oh, it's literally.
Yeah, and even that one, at one of the other,
Yep.
stories, it had him giving, or, you know, being given the sour wine.
Yep.
And I thought it was in order to keep him alive because they were waiting for Elijah.
Oh, interesting.
So then I was like, well, that's more.
Oh, that's interesting too. Yeah, yep, yep. You know, sometimes the question can only be answered by putting it in context, by comparing the gospels. You know, the way I would explain it, you know, a few weeks ago, we talked about these Gnostic gospels, and they were rejected because they didn't sync with the 4 gospels that we are pretty sure are authentic and about him. Shoot, there was one other thing I was just gonna say, and I can't remember what it was. Oh, well.
About the wine?
No, it was something totally unrelated.
You know, it's kind of like, but can we just talk
Sure.
about the centurion?
Sure, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yep, yep.
I feel like I missed something. How does he know that he was?
How did he know he was the Son of God? Yeah. So the only thing I can say is that it's in there to convey the message that his death had an immediate impact on people, or some people. And actually I did write that too. My interpretation is that the centurion was so moved by the grace and the dignity and the forgiveness that Jesus exhibited on the cross. My guess is that centurions were much more familiar with people condemned to die who reacted the way the unrepentant thief did, you know, ranting and railing and cursing and everything. And Jesus is forgiving, he's caring about his mother, you know, he's offering paradise to, you know, and so in that sense, the centurion experienced what I would call a kingdom moment. You know, it was sort of like, yeah, this is really what it's all about. And this is the way it's supposed to be. And I think he was deeply moved, and that's why he said that. Did he really understand fully what it meant to be the Son of God? I don't know. but hopefully that helps.
That explanation better than earthquakes and.
Oh, and then and the tombs opening up and people walking around. Now, there is one, thank you, and this is kind of interesting. I think one of our readings, didn't it talk about the curtain in the temple being torn in two? Yeah, yeah, that's a symbolic little embellishment, okay? Because you had the curtain and that was the holiest of holies, and that's where the priest went in once a year. And essentially, it's symbolically saying that with the death of Jesus, the barrier keeping us from the sacred and God has now been torn in two, and we have direct access to God and all that's sacred. Yeah, yeah, yep,
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah, that whole priesthood of the believer is
yep.
still a big part of what I think.
We talked about that in confirmation class too, the priesthood of all believers. That is central to basic Protestantism, that we are all we're all ministers. We all have gifts that God has given us and ways to make the love of Christ real with those gifts. Absolutely. Absolutely. The only mediator between us and God is Jesus Christ. It is not through priests. It is not through saints X, Y, and Z. However, I will tell you when we're over time, so I'll have to save it to a future class, but I do believe that there is a priestly role for ministers in the Protestant faith. Okay, and it basically has to do with a deathbed confession that I heard when I was still a student minister. Talk about leaving me shaking in my boots and how it came down and what happened afterwards. It wasn't a coincidence. It was the power of God. So maybe you can coax me into sharing that next week. I will also say we don't have time to talk about it tonight, but I've heard via the grapevine that some people are interested in continuing some sort of ongoing class Bible study. And obviously, certainly is not an expectation for everyone, but I would certainly be open to it. So we can talk some more about